Hello and grüß Gott. I'm going to start installing my Nismo headers on my VQ40D engine. This is a 2011 Nissan Xterra. The things I think I'm going to need to get started with are some PB blaster. I want to go in and spray any of the bolts that might be rusted. Also, the first thing I'm going to do is disconnect my battery and tape it up with some tape. So I'll do that and I'll be right back. I've disconnected my battery. One word is you should always wear safety glasses, especially when working around a battery. But also always disconnect the negative first and you reconnect the negative last. So disconnect the negative and then the positive, and that prevents sparking, which could end up causing an explosion from the hydrogen gas that comes out of here. So now the battery is off, and now I've got to remove my heat shields. So as you can see, there's a lot of stuff in here. I've got to try to work down in here, and I want to put some PB blaster on any of the bolts so I can get the heat shields out. I think I may have to take them out through the bottom. I don't know. The instructions are for some other Nissan products. They say to take the front wheels off, work through the wheel wells. I'm like, can this really be true? Don't know yet. So my goal is to take off the heat shields and then go underneath and disconnect both the dual exhausts in front of the cats and see if I can pull that whole back, the whole assembly back a little bit to give myself some working room, and then take each header off and slip it out from the bottom. That's what I'm going to try to do. So we'll see how it goes. A couple of things I wanted to point out to you before you get too far involved in doing this header exchange, no matter if you're using Nismo headers or somebody else's, or even if you're replacing the stock headers because maybe they've cracked. You're going to be tempted to work from the top of the engine bay. Don't do it. There's absolutely nothing you can really get to from the top of the engine bay. Well, that's not 100% true. Yeah, you can get to a couple things, but you're going to have to wheedle your way through all of these different assemblies. There's no room to work from the top at all. It is just really a waste of time. Just don't do it. So instead, you're going to pull the fender liners out and you're going to pull the wheels off, and you're going to work from the bottom of the vehicle and from the sides to get to all the things you need to on these headers. So hopefully that's going to save you some time, because I spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to do things like, you know, move my power steering reservoir or move any of this stuff here. And there's also a bunch of plumbing over here you're going to see from the radiator back. And all of those things you can't take out. Also the AC lines over here, I ended up pulling the heat shield, I think, up through there. I can't remember now. But I had to sort of push against those AC lines. You really don't want to do that. That's really risking damaging or breaking something. I was very careful, but don't work from the top at all. Just kind of get that out of your mind. Work from the side and the bottom only, and I think you'll have a much faster and very successful installation of your new headers. Okay, we've gotten the driver's side heat shield out. We actually pulled it up through here. It took two of us. What we did was we took the oxygen sensor for the front catalytic converter bracket loose and moved it out of the way, and we're able to push all these other hoses out of the way, including the AC hose. Just bend it over just enough to get this bracket through. One of the bolts did gall into the header and broke off. I tried going both directions and it still ended up snapping off. That happens sometimes, so that I have to be drilled out and replaced if I was to ever put the old headers back on. So we've gotten this far, and now I'm going to pull the front catalytic converter off and see if I can get the headers off, and we'll go from there. Okay, so what we've done so far is we actually took this front catalytic converter off and we loosened it. It's really hard to get to. There's two studs that stick through with nuts on this side and then one stud here that comes out that way, and they're really hard to get loose. We also had to use a breaker bar and a 14mm deep socket to get all of the nuts loose on the header itself. So that's done. All you got to do is take one more nut off and this is ready to come out. We're going to slide it out here, and we also, when we took the front catalytic converter out, what we did was we took the wiring harness to it loose so that it wouldn't break or get damaged. Now I will have to go to a hardware store or an auto parts store and buy another gasket, because we took more than we should have apart, but it's the only way we could see to do it. So we took this apart here, we took the front header, the front catalytic converter rear part loose also on both sides, and we did that so that we could push the whole exhaust back about an inch to get that catalytic converter out, drop it on the floor carefully, and then now we're going to take the header itself out. So we'll be right back in a second when we get this out. So we'll be right back. Here's the old header. I did snap off that screw there. Nothing I could have done about it. It's galled in. I did go back and forth trying to get it out, tried to work it over and over, but it wouldn't come out. So that's unfortunate. So you can see the new Nismo header is 3 tubes coming down into one common connection there. It actually says Nismo on it. Isn't that awesome? That's worth the money right there. Just that is worth the money. Okay, so here's the old exhaust gasket. I wanted to point out that this triangle part is pointing up, and this was facing towards the rear of the vehicle. So should have gone on something like this. So we'll make sure we put the new gasket on in the same fashion. So we're gonna go install the new header and we'll be right back. So here's what the new header looks like. It's on here. We just finger tightened the nuts. We haven't tightened them up yet. So it looks like we can't get to anything from down here. So we're gonna have to go up top side, tighten the nuts up, and then we're gonna torque them on. I'll give you the torque values in a minute. Before I put this on, I took some alcohol, 91% IPA, and some wipes and wiped down really, really well on the mating surfaces, trying to make sure there was nothing there. They looked really clean on this vehicle, because this vehicle, I just use it in the showroom. I don't take it anywhere. I just let it sit in my garage. No, just kidding. I actually do drive it. But it doesn't have very many miles on it because I mostly drive my motorcycles. So its engine's really clean and nice. So we'll tighten these up, torque them up, and then we're going to clean everything. We're going to put that one bracket back in that we took out to get the heat shield out. And then we will come back from there and show you what's next. I'm ready to start torquing down these nuts on the driver's side header. I've got them barely snugged up. I used crisscross pattern, and now I'm going to start to torque them. I'm going to try to do this in 2 sequences where I do them all crisscross, torque them once, and then come back and retorque them to make sure they're snug. I'm torquing them down to 30 Newton meters. That was about the best spec I could find. I'll show you this rig I've come up with. I'll make a little outtake to show you how I came up with it. It's really, really important that you keep the socket seated onto the nut when you're torquing it, because otherwise you'll tear the nut up. So I'm going to do that and I'll be back. All right, at this point I have completed torquing all 6 header bolts. I marked them with yellow inspector's lacquer as I double and triple checked them. So they should all be down to 30 Newton meters. And I also marked the area on the gasket where the triangle points up with a white inspector's mark. So the bolts got yellow and the other part gets a white inspector's mark. So now I'm going to put on the catalytic converter and attach it. So I'll show you how I'm going to be doing that. So I'll be back in just a second. Okay, I want to take a brief minute out to talk about what I used to remove the header nuts and also to reinstall them. The first thing is, over a period of 2 or 3 days, I sprayed PB Blast onto the nuts. I was in no real hurry for this job, so I used PB Blaster. I tried every different kind of tool I could think of to do this work, and what I ultimately came up with is a 3/8 inch drive, 14 millimeter thin wall socket connected to an adapter to turn it to 1/2 inch drive, a universal joint, a long 1/2 inch drive shaft, and a 1/2 inch drive breaker bar. And this took really all my strength to break those nuts loose, even using this long of a breaker bar. For reinstallation, I have a snap-on torque wrench that has the correct range for this job. So I couldn't find any exact torque specs, and the Nismo installation sheet didn't come with any. So I'm using 30 Newton meters as my tightening torque. I'm going in a crisscross pattern sequence and tightening up in several steps. So just getting barely snug, a little more snug, a little more snug, and finally finishing off with torquing and then going back and checking each nut after I've torqued it to make sure it's to the right torque value. And then I'm going to mark it, in this case I've marked it with some inspector's lacquer, just so I don't make any mistakes and make sure I got everyone torqued evenly. I did read on the internet, if you don't torque them evenly, it can cause warpage, and also if you over torque them when the engine heats up, it may cause the header bolts to break, from what I've read. So I don't have the experience to know that. So this is what I'm doing, and this is the rig I use. So hopefully this will help you out a lot, because I tried so many doggone different things. And also a really important thing to note is you have to make sure that this socket sits flush onto the nut as you apply the torque force to remove the nut. Otherwise you'll end up just damaging the nut, and you'll have, I don't know how you'll get it off after that. So you have to make sure it sits flush while you turn it. It's actually better if two people do it, so one person can loosen while the other person holds that down flush on the nut, because you're going to be at some weird angles. So hopefully that'll help and make your job a lot easier. Okay, the kit comes with a bolt and a nut on it with it, so that you can replace where the original headers had one stud on them facing towards the back of the car. And it comes with new nuts, of course, and those should be torqued down to 30 Newton meters. If you can get a torque wrench in there, which is really not practical, so you want to hand snug them up really, really good and snug, so that they're nice and tight. I put a new gasket in, so it should be a good connection, and I also had cleaned the flanges before I put the gasket in. So now we're going to be ready to move over to the other side and put on the other header. Okay, so we finished the driver's side, except for connecting up the front cat rear part of it. We have it in place with a new gasket on it. So here's a word to the wise. Go get a couple more extra of these gaskets, because the kit comes with 2, which is enough for the header to the front of the catalytic converter. But if you take off the catalytic converters like we're doing, you won't have enough new gaskets. And we spent about 2 hours going around town looking for gaskets. Couldn't find them. So we'll have to go to the dealer tomorrow and see if we can get them to actually look up at us and pay some attention to us and get us some gaskets. So if we can do that, we'll get some and we'll finish this job up. It'll definitely be finished tomorrow. We're late at night now, and we're just now starting on the other side. So we're going to try to get the front cat off for the passenger side, and then we're going to try to pull the heat shield out from underneath. We think that's the only way to get it out. There's so much plumbing and stuff over there, we'd have to pull all that crap out of the engine bay, and I don't want to do that. I'm going to see if I can do it an easier way. So we'll let you know how it worked out tomorrow. I wanted to take a couple of minutes out to talk about a couple of mistakes I made as I was working on my vehicle, so that you probably, hopefully, won't repeat the same mistakes if they are mistakes. One is I pulled the oxygen sensors out before I took the catalytic converter, the front catalytic converter out on each side. And the reason I did that is I didn't want to damage the oxygen sensor. And I also thought that it may not slip out. And in addition, I was also trying to save the heat shields. So I was trying to take this out, and hopefully I was going to slide the heat shields over. It worked on the driver's side. On the passenger side, it didn't work at all, and I ended up having to cut up the heat shield. So that was the first thing. And if you do take off your oxygen sensor, you're going to need a special tool that looks like this. So make sure you have that handy. And also, I made another mistake, is I cut off the gasket that goes on the oxygen sensor. So I used these kind of cutters here, and I clipped the gasket and removed it and went down to Nissan to get a new one, and they don't sell them. Now fortunately, I have 18mm metal crush washers, which will fit here and be a replacement for this crush washer here. But these are hard to find, and if you don't have them, then you certainly don't want to cut the old one off. I always replace all my gaskets because I'm really worried about going through all this effort and then putting it together and having an exhaust leak. And then it is really, really difficult to get to any of this stuff in the vehicle, as you'll find if you're doing this header replacement, whether it's a Nismo header or any of the other brands of headers. Another thing I wanted to talk about was The kit came with 2 of these kind of gaskets, and that's for where the catalytic converter attaches to the new header. Well, they didn't give you the ones for the rear, and I'm the kind of person, I'm always going to replace the gaskets, and these are Nissan part number 20691-30P00. But one word of warning, my Nissan dealer here in Chandler charged me $22 each for these gaskets. That seems really outrageous, but I had to pay it because I wanted to replace all my gaskets. So I just wanted to mention those items. So if you are gonna take the catalytic converter out, you might wanna get some gaskets ahead of time. In other words, you'll need 4 total for the entire job, 2 for each of these converters. 1 goes to each header. 1 converter to each header. You'll need 2 gaskets. So wanted to mention that, and also about the oxygen sensor, so that you know that's not a potential problem for you if you decide to pull it out. And that's about it for my words of warning and what I would have done differently during this operation. So one more thing I wanted to point out was, and I think this is kind of an engineering design flaw, is that on these catalytic converters, 2 of the studs point forward and connect to the header flange, and these are just virtually impossible to get to. I had to use obstruction wrenches and things to get to them, to break them loose, and then to remove the nuts. So very difficult. I think ideally you would pull the header and the catalytic converter together as one unit, and then put it back together before you put it into the vehicle. But the problem with that is, as you will find out, is the heat shields. So I'm going to suggest, and I'll suggest this probably several times in the video, just consider the heat shields sacrificial and just chisel the heck out of them. Cut them to pieces, don't worry about them. You're not going to reuse them for the new headers anyway. So just cut them up and throw them away, because I think it was a very poor design, and they don't slide out like Nissan in their Nismo instructions indicates. They sort of indicate that you can, when you're working on the headers, you can just move them out of the way to get to the nuts that hold the headers on, and then you can take the whole thing out as an assembly. And it doesn't work that way, as best I could see, at least on my vehicle. So there you have it, and so we'll return to our video now. Okay, this is the passenger side from inside the tire well. And as you can see, there's like tons of stuff above the headers that allows you not to get to them from the top, as I'd mentioned earlier. As you can see also, you can see where I cut the heat shield away. I had to cut the heat shield to get to the nuts that are located on the headers here, the nuts that are in front, because I could not find any other way to do it without cutting the heat shield. I spent about 3 hours trying every tool possible. So what I did is, from underneath, I cut a lot of the heat shield away, and then through the side here, I cut a lot more. And I was able to break those nuts loose and take off the catalytic converter. And also, if you look up here, there's a plug you have to get to unplug the oxygen sensor. It's really tough to get to. I also took loose this line here that goes to the transmission dipstick, so I could get just a little more wiggle room, because I was actually originally trying to pull the shield out. Forget it, it just ain't gonna happen. I've heard some people have done it, I couldn't. So now I'm ready to start unbolting the header. I'm able to get to most of the nuts, but I'm gonna have to use some creative processes to get to them all. And I'm gonna do that, get those loose, and then I'll show you what I'm gonna do next. And I guess that's it, really. So I'll be right back. Okay, one thing I also wanted to mention is, when you're handling this heat shield material, when you're cutting it, it's very sharp, so you want to use Kevlar gloves like this. You want to wear your safety glasses, especially when you're underneath, because the stuff that's in between tends to fall in your eyes. And I use some aviation shears and a pair of channel locks to hold the shield while I was cutting it. So hopefully that's a little helpful for you, and I'll be right back. Okay, at this point I've finally gotten all the nuts loose on the passenger side manifold. This was a real bear. Wow, definitely had to cut away the heat shield. So I'm getting ready to pull the manifold out, the old one, and I'm going to use some Kevlar gloves right here so that I don't cut myself on the heat shield. I'm going to pull it out at the same time. And then I'm going to clean everything up and I'll be back and show you what we're going to do. One thing I forgot to mention was that when you're going to reinstall the gasket, you want to make sure that the new gasket goes with the little pyramid shaped item towards the front and pointed up. So that's important. So you see that. So be right back. Okay, so here's the passenger side old header and the new Nismo header, and what's left of the heat shield. I pretty much destroyed it. So that's what it looks like after it's out. Be right back. Okay, at this point what I've done is I cleaned with 91% IPA the gasket mating surfaces after I pulled off the original header. I took off the old gasket, of course, and I put the new one on and noticed that the triangle is pointing up and it's towards the front. So that's the way it should be. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to slip the new headers up through in here and put them on there and put the nuts on, and then I'm going to torque them on. So I'll get all that done and I'll be back and I'll explain how it's just like the other side, and I'll explain everything I did. So I'll be right back. All right, at this point I've finished installing the header. I've put some yellow inspector's lacquer where I have quadruple checked the bolt torques. They're all set to 30 Newton meters, and I used a crisscross pattern to get to that point. Also, I put a white inspector's mark where the triangular portion points up. So that's all correct now. Now I'm ready to install my catalytic converter. So I have it down here, and you can see I have a new gasket on it, and I've cleaned the gasket surface and that, and also the pipe that it mates to in the back. So I'm ready to install that. So I'm going to insert it and I'm going to put the nuts on, and then the kit comes with a bolt to replace where there was a stud on the header. And then what I'm going to do is torque those to 30 Newton meters, just like I did the header to the engine. So I'm going to do that and I'll show you what happens next. Okay, at this point I've installed the connection from the header flange to the catalytic converter, and I'm ready to install the oxygen sensor. I'm going to put the oxygen sensor back in with a new gasket, and then I'm going to connect it up to its plug up at the top up there. Then I'll go ahead and put the fender skirt back in, put the tire back on, and I've completed this side, and I'll be ready to finish the work underneath the car. So I'll show you when we get to that next. I'm ready to reconnect both sides of the catalytic converters to the exhaust pipes. I've put new gaskets on them. I've cleaned the flanges. And so what I'm going to do is just pull this exhaust system back forward about an inch and tighten it up. I'm going to snug it up real tight with my wrench. And then we're ready to start the engine and see how it works. So we'll get this all put together and then we'll start the engine. So I'll be right back. Okay, I finished the installation. Let's go ahead and start it and see what happens. Well, I don't hear any exhaust leaks, so that's a good thing. All right, really cool. Well, this is a job that could have been done in 4 hours if I had the right know-how and right tools. But instead it took me about 14 just because I had to learn. Hopefully you'll learn from this video and you won't have to make the same mistakes I did. So thanks for watching. Tschüss.